Welcome this morning. It's great to have you here in Crystal. We have a lot going on in Crystal. We're going to share some of our highlights and some of the things we'd like to get out there and brag about. But first of all, thank you to Mayor Hemken for coming. Appreciate you coming to visit. We have a couple of council members here. Therese Kaiser, thank you for coming. Brendan Banks. These are our brand new council members. They were just elected last November. So welcome. Crystal is, Crystal's, I used to say Crystal was weird, but I'm going to say Crystal's unique. And we're becoming more and more unique. And it begins from our mission statement, Our mission statement it talks about, how we're going to serve the citizens. And really, that's probably the number one thing that has changed in Crystal. We start looking at things from a citizen perspective, whether it be financial. Our staff has been changing how they interact with citizens. You'll see many of our staff going to people's houses, not just inspectors either. Some of our senior staff, you'll see them reaching out and coming out to greet our citizens where they are, and that's a very cool thing to happen. Our city vision, we're in the midst of kind of looking at that, and probably the biggest thing that stood out in our visioning session was small town charm. So we're not sure that everybody believes small town charm is the same, but we do have big city access. And really, probably the thrust of that comment, the intent of that comment, is that we're a community that has a lot of neighbors. We have a very hometown feel in terms of our immediate neighborhoods. And that's something that the past councils have been really focusing on in trying to bring a connection amongst the neighbors themselves with Night to Unite, with our plain language initiative that took place a couple years ago. To have that connection between staff, community, and to be able to have a conversation, so we're not just talking about statutes and quoting, state law, city ordinances, that sort of thing. So that's part of the vision there. And of course, we're going to deal with finances and that sort of thing. And there's a lot to cover in that. Financially sound and stable financial practices. I would say we're doing that very uniquely, very different than other communities around us. And we'll get into a lot of that. Thriving business climate. Now that's something that obviously we want to hear from you if there's something we can do as a council, as a city to help promote that. We're doing things in development. We're doing things like streetscape work to work on that. And of course, we'll get into a little more detail on that. Just to make things fresh, make it a place that's welcoming in Crystal for our businesses. And it's not all about looks either. It's about what's going on in our ordinances. And we've done extensive work in that area as well. Creating strong neighborhoods, we'll talk about that. That comes through every one of our departments in the city of Crystal. And again, we're going to jump right into it. We're going to jump right into financial practices. There's a lot here. Debt-free, we are in our fourth year of moving towards becoming a debt-free city. Now, why would we do that? I mean, we don't want to be debt-free just to be debt-free. So after a while in this conversation, it was like, we need to answer that question. And probably the biggest, there's a lot of them actually. One is to maximize our purchasing power. If, when we talk about the finances of the city, we oftentimes talk about a pie. We have a set dollar amount each year that we are able to raise. And do we want to give some of the pie away to the, I know I have a couple banks. In our situation in Crystal, it's incumbent for us as leaders of the city to be good stewards of the funds that we have. And that's kind of the impetus, and that's part of what we talked about as well from a citizen perspective. We have to look at it from a citizen perspective. We we take money from our citizens and we use it to spend it on services for the citizens. Well, if we're taking some of that and using it less wisely, that's the thrust that I would kind of want to point out, is we want to be able to do that in an honorable way. We also want to be debt-free for our long-term planning. You can see that's number 3 there, is long-term financial planning and save to pay for our cash and capital needs. It's not only saving, sometimes it's reallocation, but we do need to fund those plans, and we have to get that money from somewhere. We also think debt-free will give us a 0 risk when it comes to default. If we don't have any debt, there's no way we can default. Obviously, there's economic climates that can affect us as a city, whether it be interest rates, whether it be increase or decrease of some of the aid we get. LGA is one example. Fiscal disparities is another example. We have that risk. Beyond that, we want to provide services for better services. Whether you come from a place of a fixed income, or whether you come from a place where you just want your pothole fixed, and whatever amount of money it takes to fix it, just fix it. It doesn't matter. The answer is the same, is you got to be good stewards of your money. So as we move on, let's go back one. Risk becomes a huge part of what we're becoming debt-free from. And the unfunded mandates and fiscal disparities is also LGA. In the early 2000s, we had a cutback in LGA, and it affected Crystal pretty dramatically. We had to cut back our staff. We had to cut back our services, and we don't want to do that again. So we've done a lot of work to try to prevent that from ever happening again. And a lot of that is we're reworking our funds to the point where all of our LGA now is in our capital area. So if something happens in fiscal disparities or in government where we get less aid, we're not going to be cutting staff. We're not going to be cutting anything. Sure.
LGA.
Local government aid. I apologize. Local government aid. It's interesting because local government aid for us is a huge part of our budget. When you compare the amount of local government aid compared to the amount we save for capital, local government aid is bigger. So that kind of frames in what we're dealing with in Crystal, and we have to take it on very seriously. That won't be the case in the long run, I would say. As we start saving for our projects, you're going to capital increase. You're going to start an increase of our funds. So economic crisis, we've seen that in 2008. We know how devastating that can be. Talk about financial agility. As we move further down the line, because this is certainly a process, when we move further down the line, the funds increase for the savings for streets, for buildings, for equipment, what have you. That will give us a financial agility. I've been using that term a lot, and it means a couple of things. As things come that are less predictable, we are able to adjust because we have the money. We're not to getting debt at a time when maybe interest rates could be rising. So that financial agility is going to be important as we move through the economic cycle. I think most of us realize that interest rates have risen, and they probably will rise a little bit more, and we don't want to take the brunt of that. So we're doing some long-term planning in that respect. And of course, there's the interest piece. The interest piece that we pay on our bonding, any way you shake it, when we look at our fund, it's about 1/3 that goes to the banks, and it's 2/3 that go. We want to get to the point where every dollar that we collect goes directly to the project, whether it be for design, for mortar, for equipment, what have you. we want to get the best use out of our money as possible. So this process we've gone through, and we've changed what we do in budgeting. We went to a 2-year cycle. And the 2-year cycle is unique to cities. It's unique to the legislature, but it is for us. And the thrust of it is that we can do our long-term planning. In that pillar slide, that was number 3, the long-term planning. And quite honestly, the majority of our work here at Crystal, whether it be staff or the council, comes in that third pillar. That's where the work is. It's easy to make a decision and not get new debt, pillar 1. It's fairly easy if we have the money available to pay down a bond early. But the third one, that's where it all comes in. And what we needed is, we seem to be going in a cycle. Okay, we get a new council, they get their feet wet, we start working together, next right into budget cycle, we get budget cycle, that seems to take us to the end of the year, and the same cycle occurs the next year. What we do is to have a period of time where we could really take a look at what's going on in Crystal and figure out, okay, where are our deficits? Where are the challenges going to be coming up? And those areas are going to be addressed in our second year. So this is 2019 is our first year, the numbers for the 2 years. But this year, the council has the opportunity to figure out, okay, what's pressing, what's most important, and that's going to be the thrust of our year. And we're looking very forward to that. Then we move on to financial policies. We created internal service funds. We've changed how we do our accounting so that it tells us a better story on a department level. It helps us with this long-term planning, and that's part of the process of doing that solid long-term planning. Let's go on to the next. This is key right here, our financial practices. Creating a single fund for street maintenance and street reconstruction. We just went through a long process of rejuvenating our roads. It started in 1995, and we've completed that last year. This is key. If we don't start focusing long-term and starting to save for street reconstruction, that's going to happen in 25 years, 30 years, pushed back into the cycle. So that's the type of long-term planning we're talking about. We used to have to do assessments for not only the street reconstruction, but maintenance as well, the mill and overlay piece. And in order to prevent us from going back to that, we have to fund it. And it's a lot of money when you talk about streets themselves. And we can't do it in 10 years, we can't do it in 5 years, and we certainly can't do it in a year. And there's a number of things. The reason we're doing this is for the citizen. From a citizen perspective, what we were doing with assessments is, okay, we're going to be in your neighborhood this year, and here's your bill, and this is how much you owe. And the lead time is it's less than a year. It's a year and a half tops. Well, okay, so that's kind of a contradiction. Excuse me. But the point being is they get very little time to actually plan and save. We had street construction programs going for $11,000 in our last cycle a couple years ago. And for somebody just to come up with $11,000 out of their pocket, to pay the city for the new streets that they're putting in is a big deal. And when we talk about debt from a perspective of getting every dollar and using it, when we do assessments, most of our assessments are funded by debt underneath it. There's bonds that support that. So if they can't afford it, then they have to take on what I would call hidden debt. So from a citizen perspective, which is what one of our goals is, we find that to be, to get away from that is going to be something that serves them in the long run. I think we've all heard it. Maybe some of us have said it. I thought the city was already paying or taking our money to build the roads. Well, we're kind of going back to that concept of making sure that everything we have is inside inside the property taxes. So, yeah, it's a little weird. I mean, we're going back to some of the things that used to be a long time ago used to be done. New Hope, they actually have been doing that for years. New Hope has been not assessing and using their funds from their property taxes to fund their street for a long time. Most cities are not like that, and I think that some of us remember St. Paul, that just regular operation type stuff. That's not a thing. So this is, yeah.
Sorry, I actually live here in Crystal too, so I know that when we first moved into Crystal, we were one of the lowest taxes in actually most of the metro area, I think, and so it's.
For property tax?
For property taxes, so I'm guessing that maybe that's why the street assessments, I know that our property taxes are gradually,
So-
increasing.
So we are shifting from an assessment model to going back to property taxes. So you're going to see a natural increase in property taxes. To this date, as we've been going through this process, we're still remaining lower than the communities around us, which is a good thing. Will that be able to be maintained in the long run? I don't know. But we have to from relying on assessments to saving money and actually paying cash for it. And there's a period of time there, and I'll talk a little bit about what that breadth looks like. That breadth is where we're going to kind of pull back and start saving, and you're not going to see a lot of activity, and it's going to feel like we're not doing anything. All that's happening is our taxes are increasing. But when you compare it with the assessments, the $11,000 you may pay for a street reconstruction, and what your property taxes are inching up, it's really not an increase, when it comes down to the bottom line for the citizen. Again, there's that citizen perspective. Good question. Good question. So, long-term plan, there's quite a few areas. We talked about streets, street reconstruction, maintenance. There's needs for the police station that are coming up. We're going to have to save. These are needs to help serve our community. Long-term plans are going to be key to kind of speak to what we talked about right just now about how are we going to maintain and not raise our taxes above what's where it should be, what our neighbors are. So that's going to be a kind of an interesting balancing trick that we do in the next 4 or 5 years. But infrastructure in Crystal, we've seen some increases in our Joint Water Commission costs, whether it be water or whether it be sewer. And that's an area that we've already addressed some of the infrastructure needs. We're seeing increasingly more water main breaks than ever, and that's continuing to increase every year due to the age of our infrastructure. And that is being covered. We've already covered that cost. We are not to deal with, oh my gosh, now all of a sudden we don't have any money to do all these repairs on this aging infrastructure. Who would have known that our water mains are going to break? It's only 30 years, 40 years. So, so this is a thing that we have tons of professionals in our staff. We have tons of professionals in our council. We can predict a lot of these things. Emergency funds, we talk about prediction, long-term planning. What about the things you can't predict? Well, we have these professionals here in place to do that long-term planning. Let's use them. Let's do it right. Let's do our jobs. Is kind of where it comes right down to, and that is what we're doing. So when it comes to having an emergency fund for those unexpected things, we have that emergency fund in our operation. We have to have 45% of our operation ready at hand in case something comes. As we move forward in this process of becoming debt-free, our funding is going to increase as we get closer to these projects, which gives us the agility. If there is something that all these professionals miss, well, we have the agility to deal with it. But the professionals we have on staff and the professionals we have on the council, I think can do a pretty good job. We've got very predictable things. We've got infrastructure, we've got staff, police departments, fire departments, streets, parks. These are things that are very easy to plan. Well, I'm not going to say very easy because there's a ton of work that goes into it. I don't want to minimize the work of staff either. They work extremely hard. So the financial policies is a huge piece of our long-term planning. I could probably go on the financial area for a very, very long time. There's a lot of detail, there's a lot of thought that goes into this. But let's talk business a little bit. We had city code review, 12 residents and 2 business people diving into the ordinances of Crystal. How much fun is that? These are volunteers that came to Crystal and they said, let's take a look at what we have and see if we can do it better. And we are, almost 3 years into this process, and we've done some amazing things as far as simplifying. We've eliminated 383 ordinances, just completely eliminated them. They're either redundant, they don't apply anymore. There's just a lot of reasons. We've taken some things out, reorganized them. Sometimes they were in multiple locations. And part of our plain language initiative in the past has been, was rooted in this, in how do we word things to where someone can just go and read and understand what it says without taking it to the lawyer. I mean, that used to be a thing, I think, near our founding where we wanted to have that kind of plain language, but we're trying to return to that in Crystal again. We're unique. So this is very different to and have citizens actually take that on. But as far from a business perspective, we have what do we call them? Tradesmen. We've eliminated some of the licensing for that because they're already being regulated at the state level or another agency. And we took a look at some of the what value are we adding with these licenses, and it turned out the value was already there from the other regulation, if there was value at all. So we've taken some of that away, so we're not double regulating. I think that's something that's fairly unique in a world where governments are tending to want to regulate more and more. We've kind of backed off a little bit where it makes sense, and that's the key, is where does it make sense? Oftentimes we get into these regulatory cycles where, okay, we're trying to fix what we just put in place, and then there becomes more and more, and it becomes more and more confusing. So one of the areas is our code review. It is simpler to understand. We touched on that. Fire suppression systems. That's something we're going to be talking a lot about moving forward, but we do have some businesses, some buildings that are remaining vacant in Crystal. And we've had at least 5 different people who have come forward to fill these buildings. They wanted to occupy it, but their occupancy required sprinkler systems. And unfortunately, about we've gone and walked the other way because of the cost of sprinkler systems. And we're going to have a long conversation about that this year. But what we did, and I know I'm kind of jumping ahead in the slides, but what we did is we provided a loan system for fire sprinkler systems, and what that does is it gives a business who wants to move in a loan for fire sprinkler systems. We have Elysian Theater coming. That's the building they're moving into. Is the sprinkler system alone is going to be over $100,000, which is the limit of the loan that we can provide. But that's a lot of money when you consider all the other startup costs for a business. We're able to use the funds that we have sitting in our EDA to help businesses make entry into spaces of existing buildings. It's very important. Currently, when it comes to sprinkler systems in our fire department, we work with New Hope, we work with Fire Marshal, and there's some disparities in how New Hope works and how we work in the number of vacancies. So we're hoping to open up a pretty broad conversation about how can we deal with that requirement, and is there something we can do, because there are some options in that. But that's going to help access to the buildings, the existing infrastructure in Crystal. So now that I've jumped you around. Let's go to thriving business community where it shows Taco Bell. We have a number of businesses coming in, Taco Bell, U-Haul, we have another storage facility coming in, North Clinic. So to have those come, and let's go 2 slides forward to thriving business. This is kind of a culmination of what we've been doing in relation to business in Becker Park, and streetscape on Bass Lake Road corridor. I'm pretty certain we're going to see some private investment coming here. This is an area where we're investing $6.2 million. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for Crystal. And it comes in forms of grants from other agencies, but 2/3 of it is coming from Crystal itself, between the EDA in our regular budget. This is an area that is already been transformed, but it's going to be transformed more as the park gets developed. This park is going to kind of promote a city center, and we don't necessarily in Crystal have a city center, but this is primed with that type of investment. We have a streetscape that's looking sharp. This will be a 2-year process to go through the park, the park remodel, as it were. But this reflects a lot of what I've been talking about in terms of long-term planning. We put together a 20-year long-term plan for our parks, and this is the beginning of it. It's going to transform that park. It's taking it from ball fields to a more community-orientated park. There's going to be performance areas. There's a big performance area off to the right. There's accessible playground areas. There's going to be a splash pad. Underneath this is going to be a huge stormwater storage facility. It's going to help us on the north side of Crystal because we still have some challenges with stormwater discharge. It's a very flat area, and we don't have a lot of slope to work with in our streets to deal with that. So this is going to be very important from that respect. This is also potentially the future site for light rail. I'm not sure, but I think when it comes to people along the line of the blue line, I'm pretty sure we have pretty much, we've prepared ourselves for the blue line if it does indeed come. We've done the investment. By the time it can be built, we'll be done with our park. There's a row of strip mall of businesses there that are going to benefit from that. They're going to be very prime for development, remodeling, what have you. I think it could change the mall past properties that someday, way down the line, actually turn their businesses and have it face there. There's just a ton of opportunity that's going to be surrounding that space, and that's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to change things. Our zoning is changing, so that it will allow some of these new developments to occur. You know, the commercial style developments alongside of a park like this. So we're excited to see what's happening here. I know there's already a buzz in this area. We haven't seen anything come through yet, but I'm willing to bet we're going to start to see some pretty dramatic changes in the direct area, regardless of light rail, just due to the investment in having that center there. So we're very excited in that respect.
So when is light rail anticipated?
It's not federally funded. I think 20 estimate. It's hard to know if that's a reality or not. That could change. Well, I'm not sure we're planning for light rail. I think we're planning for a prosperous business community. And if light rail comes, that's just, it's just, a cherry on top for business to have people coming in. So that's how we look at it. So we are ready for it if it is going to come. And that's that. We're excited. Talked about strong neighborhoods. Have touched on the park system a little bit. Welcome Park was the first renovation we did, and Welcome Park was the beginning of the 20-year master plan because of what we were going to do at Becker. We've put in a huge softball field, which was constructed this year, and that's going to receive the softball, to serve the softball community, very similarly as to what Becker Park did. For our Frolics Community Festival, most of that from this summer, moving forward, softball will not return to Becker. But that's why Welcome renovation was a big deal, is to kind of allow us to maintain our festival operations and whatever operations were happening at Becker during the construction. We've seen some huge improvements in Mack Park. It's been a long time coming. We've worked with Three Rivers to kind of get that revitalized. That project is underway. But Becker Park is the biggest park we have. We're creating it to become a destination park. And I talked about taking a breath. After we get Becker Park done, we have to take a breath as a community on the park system, because we have to be able to fund that from a cash perspective, and it's going to be a couple years before we move forward in that respect. Public safety measures. There's just all kinds of outreach. This kind of came from our outreach task force, kind of what I'm about to talk about. Of course, the departments were doing their own thing. Civic organizations were doing their own thing. Night to Unite, we talked about, coming together as a community. The whole nation's doing that. We like to think that we're kind of stepping it up a little bit more, just in some of our programming to try to bring community together. But these are what's happening from within. Coffee with a Cop, Shop with a Cop, Night to Unite, Run for Leo. But we're starting to take the things from the task force, the ideas from the outreach task force, and starting to cluster some of these events. So it's not just one event that we're having. And that's part of the thrust, is to bring the community together. I mean, we talk about millennials, and they like to have their third place where they can go and be, and they can do a number of different things. They can spend some time somewhere and exist somewhere, and they can do a number of different things, whether it be food, whether it be some entertainment, whether it be maybe it might be a craft fair, but just a place to be. And as we move forward, we think that builds our neighborhoods in a stronger way. And you start to see that throughout some of our civic engagements. The Lyons corn feed, that's a huge example of what we're talking about. The Lyons have been doing a corn feed for many years, but what are we seeing wrap around the Lyons now? We see a car run. We have the old steam-driven cars that are coming from whatever area they're coming from. It's a car run. I don't really understand it, but that's what it is. And they come to a place where there's music being played now, and the music is being blasted over an I don't know, muscle car show, where they just park them, and you have the people who actually did the work standing next to the car. And we have, or what they do is they have trophies given out for the best car. I think the chief gives an award. I give an award. It's really a cool thing. So those are the types of things that we're trying to do in Crystal, trying to create those atmospheres where, we can go to these places and we can meet our neighbors and enjoy our neighbors and have that time and space with them.
Can I
Sure.
share one thing? from the football facet, I mean, you see the pictures of different people here, but one area that gets skipped over a lot is the teenagers. And last year, the football program at Cooper decided to start a program called with the Cops and Fire. A big kickball tournament that we're starting up. And
Awesome.
a couple. And now it's spread. The word has spread, and individuals from communities are going to come and do it with our football players this summer. So
Okay.
and we're going to open it up to the public too. It was hilarious.
It sounds like a blast.
Oh.
No, when it comes ball, or you're talking about kickball, softball, of course my mind goes to my own experiences. I had a softball game when I was a firefighter, and we played against the police. And I'm not a good softball player, not at all. And my first time up, I hit a line drive and hit the pitcher, right in the shin. Second time up, I'm thinking, oh gosh, I'm not going to do that. I'm never going to do that again. So I changed my stance a little bit, and then I swing as hard as I can, and I hit the same pitcher in the same shin. Is Chief here today?
That's accuracy. Go with
Yeah, that's our chief now. So many things happen in those games. You never know what's going to happen when we start playing games. So it's just a fun little story. Let's move on to home improvement loans and grants. We have these in Crystal, and happened recently to change them. We use our local EDA funds to leverage some of that funding. Needless to say, there's plenty of opportunity, and Crystal citizens need to know that that money is available if they're interested in having that type of a loan to help remodel or what have you for their property. Grants. You gotta get the word out that they exist and spread the word on that one. So when we talk about our 20-year master plan for parks, and we talk about not having the funds to do that, we're going to have to take a breath. We're still doing everything we can to try to figure out how can we accelerate some of this stuff. We've been converting underutilized land, and we've been converting it and selling some what we call surplus properties to raise funds so that we can do some of these improvements a little bit sooner than what the 20-year master plan set out. The way we're going, as aggressive as staff has been and as aggressive as I think we have been handling this plan, I'm pretty sure we're going to finish this 20-year plan in something like 15 years. In the bottom pictures here, this is kind of the thing we're working on right now. That's Iron Horse Park. There's an area well actually the whole park isn't really designated as parkland. It's a kind of an informal park. It's not an attractive park. It's very low. There's very little use there. And the end of that park, it's going to tie in. There's a spit of land there where we're going to sell those 3 lots. And timing is everything. I mean, New Hope, just to the west of that, is doing a huge development along the railroad tracks there, and we're going to kind of work with that project and sell 3 lots here, which is going to be able to give us, if the council decides to do that, give us the opportunity to hit Iron Horse Park way before it was scheduled. I mean, Iron Horse Park was not even on the radar, but this gives us an opportunity to make a park that's in the neighborhood. It's going to be a neighborhood park. Make it attractive, make it useful, and you know, it's again, I'm pretty sure council is going to probably vote to take that money. They don't have to, but based on the direction we've been heading, it's more likely that we will take that money and directly fund it into that park. So we're excited about that.
What are the lots zoned?
They are, I don't know the answer to that.
It's R1.
R1?
Thanks.
And currently it's 1 lot, is that correct?
Right, the existing park is comprised of 5 lots.
Mhm.
And so the westerly lot is the one that the city would be splitting into 3 lots for new homes.
Mhm.
And then the easterly 4 lots would be replatted as parkland.
Yep.
So it would become dedicated. The remaining 4/5 of the current park would be dedicated parkland going forward.
Thank you. That's exciting. We talked about, well, we talked about the CBA website being improved. Well, we've done that here at Crystal as well. I think we had the same gentleman on the council kind of driving some of that as well, our former council member Kolb. We've been working a lot more with social media, quarterly newsletters, all these things. CC the media, some posts, some custom videos. You'll see some more type blog style videos coming up on our website as we move forward. I'm going to start talking a little bit more about some of the so that's. Why do we want to be debt free? Well, we want to be debt free so that. And you'll start to understand some of the things that we've been doing, some of the maneuvering we've been doing, as we'll start to get that message out for you as we move forward in this effort. And more than anything, it's to have that community pride, have the community understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, because what we're doing in Crystal is not being done in any other metro community in Minneapolis, St. Paul area. It's that unique. That's what makes us unique. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Community events, we have, again, this is a focus towards our citizens and bringing neighborhoods together. Cheers to Crystal, we had that event. That was a fun event. We had 8 breweries show up there. One pop brewery, soda pop, and they had many varieties. Movies in the park, Crystal Frolics. I'm just going to go on a quick tangent here on Crystal Frolics for you. Crystal Frolics, when it comes back in 2020, it's not going to be a big beer tent and 2 softball fields with a carnival next to it with a few food items. It's going to be something completely different. That has not yet been defined as to what that's going to be. And it's not only going to be civic organizations running the city festival any longer. We're calling on businesses, we're calling on you, we're calling on churches, we're talking on community members to help create what that looks like. After Frolics this year, which is going to be held at Welcome Park, we need to hit the ground running. So early in the fall this year, we're going to have something, it's not defined yet, but something to where we are going to reimagine what Frolics looks like from a community perspective. I'm really hoping that the direction of it is going to involve business in a big way. And not just to give businesses a chance to promote their businesses, but I'm really actually hoping that we can design a system where the businesses can come in and actually get something back for their efforts, not just business down the line, but have the event be something that helps them. So I'm hoping they can make some money is what I'm saying. So when that comes later this fall, we're going to be reaching out to you guys here at the CBA. We're going to be reaching out to everybody to help take part in that process and that planning, that dreaming, or whatever it may be, because when 2020 comes, we need to have that framework in place so that all we have to do is implement it. So that's what's going to happen there. And again, it goes back to the same thing of bringing different groups and creating a space that people want to spend some time with and meet their neighbors and greet their neighbors. So we're looking very forward to that. Corn Feed is there in the car run, airport open house, Water Fun Day from the fire department, Winterfest. These are great events that we get just tons of attendance to, and it's growing every year, I think. We're very excited with what we're doing with that. And that is who we are, where we're going, why we're going, some of it. I know there's a lot. There's a lot there. We have basically your neighbors serving their neighbors in Crystal, so that's all I have for you.